Do you feel like you're
I don't know. I have got to.
Are you okay if we close the door, Holly?
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe you just.
I
Yeah,
don't see if I do.
I'm guessing.
Okay, so it is 6:30, and we'll go ahead and officially start the work session. And council members, I know I don't ask go over to the end, and today I'm going to really express that I need everyone to ask quick for the end to make any comments, ask any questions, because staff put a lot of work and effort into this presentation, and it'll be best that they get all their information out before we start interrupting. And that's on Zoom as well. And I'm not for sure if Carson's going to be here or not, but if he comes in late, I will interrupt to just bring that up to him to Sanchez. But feel free to go ahead. I know you wanted to go ahead.
Okay, and I was just messaging Rachel because she's obviously one of our subject experts. I'm not sure what's going on. But we'll get started kind of to what Ty's point is. This was like this ball of yarn, and we knew what our goal was, is we have nuisance homes that have code issues that are not compliant with code to varying degrees, and how we go about getting compliance to get the situation fixed in a way that gets the situation fixed without risking city funds at the same time, type of thing. And when you start pulling at these yarns, some are connected, some aren't. And so what we have spent hours trying to do is figure out how to create a presentation that tries to make it as simple as possible. But what I can tell you is George, Rachel, Eric, and I have spent hours talking through this issue. And then even just today, Eric, Rachel, and I spent 2 hours trying to figure out how the flow of the presentation should go. So of the 13 years I've been with you guys, this has by far been the most complicated presentation to try to pull together. So if you have a question, please just kind of make a note type of thing as we go through. So as we get started.
So we can just since Carson and BJ just walked in, since you two. Since we had a couple of members walk in and wait a little bit, we just wanted to stress in this meeting, we're asking that you keep all your comments to the very, very end. Don't interrupt staff because they put a lot of work into this presentation. At the very end, there will be time for us to ask any questions we may have, but for the sake of the presentation, no interruptions whatsoever until the finish.
Okay. So historically, there's been some homes that we brought to your attention as it relates to we may have to do condemnation. And that's obviously when they're getting to a stage where the structure itself is no longer safe, and we're going to look at those types of proceedings. That's not what these types of homes are. The other thing is, since this is a public meeting, we want to be respectful of individuals who own homes in our community. So while these pictures are of actual homes, we're not going to give identifying information type of situation, but these are real pictures from home or from Alamosa. So to start, these are all structurally sound homes. They're not homes that need to be torn down and condemned.
I'm gonna walk and talk because I'm running late. Went out of my way to park in the wrong parking lot. Okay, so I think that some definitions from the International Property Maintenance Code to start are helpful. These are summarized, they're not actually from the code because nobody wants to read the actual code. So basically just structural sound means that you can meet snow load, wind load, and there's no material risk to your neighbors or yourself. So that's a structurally sound house, and that's what we're talking about today. Houses that are structurally sound. They are not candidates for demolition. Okay, uninhabitable spaces is a broader category, and this was a lot of pages of text and condensed down. So unsafe or illegal, that means if you built a home with no inspections and we don't know whether or not it's safe or not. In severe disrepair, this is just one that you've neglected maintenance for so long that it's either so unsanitary or so much maintenance is needed that it can't be lived in. So infestation with bugs or rodents, you have garbage or rubbish, that's sort of like a hoarding type of a deal. And then you don't have basic ventilation, plumbing, heat, essential equipment is like your electrical being in working order. And then located in a way that creates danger to people is basically another hoarding thing. So there's not adequate egress or ingress. Okay, again, this is a huge chunk of the code condensed down into 3 paragraphs. But basically, we have a requirement that's not well known that you have to be able to keep your house at 68 degrees without human intervention. So that means that it can't be a wood stove, it can't be a space heater, it has to be something that just independently keeps your house at 68 degrees. Otherwise, you are not a habitable structure according to the code. I know that we all have people that we know that just have wood stoves and do just fine. So plumbing, you can't have any leaks, you can't have any clogs, you have to have hot water and cold water, you have to have a working toilet, you have to have a working way to bathe yourself, you have to have a working sink, you have to be connected to a public sewer system. We have had a code enforcement issue in the past where everything worked in the house, but we were pretty sure they weren't connected to public facilities. So that means that their gray water and their black water just ran into the ground. And then safety. So this is basically if it's another thing where if it's a fire risk, again, unsafe wiring could cause a fire. You need to be able to get in and out of ingress and egress, kind of the same things we already talked about. You need to be able to open windows in case there's a fire. So those are things where like real life safety is an issue. So these are kind of the 3 categories. So when people end up on the wrong side of code enforcement from the building departments, it's usually a violation of something in these 3 bullets. So this is fire risk hoarding, which is a term we sort of made up. But we wanted to be able to differentiate between hoarding, which is just like you collect too many things, and hoarding where Frank and his firefighters would be in material danger, as would the people that live in the home if there were a fire. And so there's a really nice graphic that Frank provided on the next page, but this is just sort of like, this is where it goes from being you're a hoarder to you're in danger. So, you know, you can't, there's paths that are narrower than 36 inches. You can't get to the exits or the windows because there's things in the way. You have flammables by your heat source, and that most of the material that you're hoarding is something that's easily flammable, like newspapers or something. The next page is how firefighters determine where, as Eric described it earlier, this is his house on a normal day at 1. 2 is sometimes, 3 is a really, really bad day. And then 9 is Frank and his guys can't get in and out to save people and are at risk themselves. Okay, and then also this is a refresher. Like, we're talking about this because we all get these complaints. And I think council even probably more than staff, because it's just something where when you have a house like this in your neighborhood, you hear about it all the time. And so we hear that they hurt property values. We hear that they are places for people to use drugs and distribute drugs, that they attract sort of a criminal element, that there's squatters in some of these homes, that sometimes these homes smell. They pose a public health risk, so especially when we have issues where people don't have adequate plumbing. We have lots of incidences. You'd be really surprised where people are using their yards to go to the bathroom. Safety risks, which is, people, we also get a lot of calls like, my grandma's a hoarder, she can't get in and out of her house. I worry about whether or not an ambulance will be able to get to her. So those types of things. And then vermin, rodents, bed bugs, we get complaints about those things. Mold, those types of things. We don't really get into mold much, but it's another thing that we get common complaints about. Okay, so this is kind of the way that we have logically laid this out. We feel like these houses fall into these 4 buckets. And we all kind of take turns explaining what they mean, and I'll let Eric and Heather fill in the gaps when I lose them a little bit. But the first 2, or the first one, is pretty easy. So it's a financially resourced property owner. So this is someone, for whatever reason, has the capacity and the money to fix the house they own, but they've chosen not to. And so in these cases, usually what we do is we enforce the full code. We would like to start to be able to levy fines against them for non-compliance. And then we also think that the most effective way to get them to comply is to do the fines and then send those fines to collections. We always have the possibility to let those fines pile up and then certifies it a lien to the county treasurer. And then potentially, if they don't pay that lien, we end up with ownership of the home. We don't really feel like that's very likely in the financially resourced category. Usually people will just pay the fines and then they're most likely to comply. I do think it's also important that we talk about the fact that for code enforcement, both for Captain Birch and myself, more than anything, we're interested in compliance. That's what we're interested in. We're not trying to collect fees. We're not trying to make money. We just want the neighborhoods to be better, the houses to be better, people to be safer. And so fines are just a motivating tool. We're going to go to the first slide, please. So this is an example of a real financially resourced house. This is a real house in Alamosa where someone started the demo. The person has the money and the capacity to finish fixing this house and has not. So this one is sitting half constructed. There hasn't been any movement on it in, I think, 2 years. Building permit was actually never obtained, but we also have ones where the permits just lapse and the buildings just languish. And so we have issues with people breaking in. There's obviously a public safety hazard. This one in particular has some asbestos contamination, not a lot, and could be easily rectified. Like it's just a simple encapsulation type of asbestos. It's not a big deal. There's weeds and trash in the yard. And then all of these things, my whole part of my department's whole part in participating in these code enforcement conversations is really less about the building code and more about our housing crisis. So Captain Birch can also attest to this, that we make lots of jokes in our meetings when we meet every month with PD, but mostly we're talking about getting houses back in circulation. So this is a great house in a nice neighborhood, and it's just kind of sitting there rotting. So what we're proposing for these ones are easy, is enforce the full code, fines, and then either send those fines to collections or have a lien, and theoretically the city could end up owning the house. Next slide. Okay, so this is where it starts to get harder, and I'm going to go to a category called judgment proof and turn it over to our attorney.
Because judgment proof is an informal legal term, but it's used all the time in the law, which means simply that someone that you're looking at doesn't have resources to collect from. So if we levy fines, there's no way to make them pay fines because if they have no income to garnish, they have no assets to go after. A fine is just a number that racks up and never gets paid. So unlike the financially resourced people where fines really do find to really be a motivation to bring compliance, someone who's judgment proof has no assets that fines can be collected from, there's no motivation. That's not a motivating factor. You just rack up paper fines and you get a piece of paper that says they owe the city money, and that's it. So we have to think about what happens. How do we motivate compliance for people who are judgment proof?
And so what you can see here is there's some categories under it. We've got judgment proof, and then you've got vacant and occupied. And then under occupied, you have individuals that might be qualified for SSI and those that don't. When we get further on into the presentation, we'll explain how we recommend going after people who are judgment proof, because again, we still want to get compliance. And there's still a house that could be a safety risk. There's still a house that's creating an issue for the neighborhood. That still exists. So just because they have no money doesn't solve the issue type of situation. So all of these fall under judgment proof. But as we talk about the different codes and how we should apply them, as we talk about how to do enforcement, for you as council members, there may be some variances of how you want to treat something if it's vacant versus if it's not. You may want to treat it differently if it's someone who objectively qualifies under criteria as SSI versus not SSI, or you guys could decide there's no difference at all. that you're just gonna treat all judgment proof the same way. But when we thought through this, there's a lot of rabbit holes that could happen, because someone could say, well, how is it fair to uphold the code if someone doesn't have the ability to pay? And then someone heartless like me says, if they don't have the ability to pay, they shouldn't be owning that house. That when you buy a house, you need to be able to have the funding to maintain the home. And there's a lot of sad stories. I understand people living on a fixed income. I understand people inheriting a home and then something changing from a medical perspective. I understand all of that. And sometimes there needs to be a prompt for them to find housing that better matches what their income and their abilities are, type of situation. But you guys may feel differently. You may feel like there's more gray area in some of these. So that's why we also felt if we break this up a little bit, it's objective. It's not just who tells the best sob story. It's not who can get a council member who's going to go to bat for them and the other person didn't get the right council member. It's not who gets a hold of staff and they're in a bad mood. We figured the more we could break this into very clear, logical categories that can then be applied, and that's kind of how we can walk through this type of thing. So if you go to the first one, so these are all people who cannot pay fines type of thing. And the first one is if it's the property's vacant.
Yeah, and so this one, again, like these are sitting in our neighborhoods lots of times. These are very viable homes. They're boarded up. There's no one living in them. It's hurting our housing stock. And then there are issues where people break in. So there's the drug use issues, there's weeds in the yards, and nobody's usually taking care of them. And I will also say, and I probably should have led with this, that part of the reason that we're here, we've been wanting to meet with council about this for so long, is really that it's a revolving door for most of these cases. And so we came to you and talked about demoing a couple houses. We talked about Loma's house. We talked about some of those really hard cases about a year and a half ago. And then these ones we were kind of making progress, and it's almost like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And they're constantly on the CSO's dockets. They're out there all the time. They're dealing with these same houses over and over again. Captain Birch is like, can't we tear them down? And the fact of the matter is they're structurally sound. We can't tear them down. That's not the ethical thing to do. We need to figure out how to get these houses to be functional again. And vacant houses are probably one of the number ones that Captain Birch and his people would complain about. And so again, these ones are problematic because sometimes it's you inherited it. You don't have, maybe there's minor things that need to be fixed, but you don't have the money to fix it. And so you just let it sit empty and you pay the, $300, $400 a year in taxes or something, and you live in California and it's not your problem. And so for these ones, we're also proposing enforcing the full code, doing fines and then liens, and then if they don't comply, city ownership. And that is sort of an aggressive tactic, but it's to get these houses back as homes. Okay, and so now we get into the sticky ones. And Heather kind of already said this, but these ones just feel different. So Eric teases me that I'm all gooey on the inside now that I have kids, and that I used to be tougher. And I don't probably think I'm ever going to get any better. I'll stay gooey. And so I really struggle with these. When we do our monthly meetings where we talk about little old ladies on fixed incomes with, non-functional plumbing, or, the developmentally disabled man that's on our list and has been on our list forever, it's hard to, really be aggressive with these people. So SSI qualified, slide please. Okay, so it's a federal program that provides payments to people with disabilities, blindness, or people aged 65 or older. We're not asking for proof that they are an SSI. We're just saying this is sort of a broad category of people that our society has collectively agreed need to be helped and taken care of. And so these are the people that probably struggle most of all. So the developmentally disabled gentleman, that's his house. So he did not have hot water, and we've talked about this house, but did not have water for something like 10 years. Did not have heat for that same amount of time. That is a huge gaping hole in front of his non-functional toilet in his bathroom. This is all fixed. So this house has come a really far way, but I mean, this is a real house in Alamosa. So it's uninhabitable according to the code. This one, again, there was the inside and the outside were trashed. This gentleman also has very serious hoarding issues in a compulsive way, so much so that he can't live at Blue Peaks because of his hoarding. propensity. So he kind of owns his own home and he lives there, and it's sort of a revolving door. And code enforcement is there, the co-responders work with him a lot, but there's sort of just no finish line for this property. And he's not the only one. There's other properties like this. Okay, next. Okay, not SSI qualified. Next slide. These ones are like often trickier because these are oftentimes in our community those that just don't want to comply and those that just don't really see any problem with the way their home is. And then also they're the ones, kind of like Heather said, that they just don't have the means to be homeowners. So I think most people in this room own your own home. It takes a certain amount of, you have a financial responsibility to fix things in your home. If your water heater goes out, you're out a lot of money to fix it. It's not like renting where your landlord will fix it. And so homeownership is a different level of responsibility. And so it's a person who's not SSI qualified, the property's uninhabitable, same sort of issues, hoarding issues, unsanitary issues, plumbing issues, basically just uninhabitable and like just not a clear path forward. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is, I'll go back to the gentleman that's developmentally disabled. He has done a tremendous amount of work. He has a caretaker that has helped him. He has running water for the first time in a decade. He does not have hot water. He has heat for the first time in a decade, but he has open electrical wiring. So he hasn't reached the finish line by the building department standards. And as we looked at that first slide, the building department standards are kind of high. Like, again, I think probably every single one of us at this table could think of someone that heats their house just with wood and is fine. But that doesn't mean code. And so this is where we as staff have sort of proposed that we start categorizing things, not only in the categories we've shown you in that, the tree, but also trying to think about things that are nuisances, personal nuisances. So they're an inconvenience for the person that lives in the home versus what is a safety issue for the public, a safety issue for them, and a public nuisance.
Yes. And so as we're going through this, as staff, if the code's there, we feel an obligation to enforce it. And the purpose of this tonight is saying, in some instances, some codes may only raise to the level of a personal nuisance versus other codes we feel raise to the level of a safety public nuisance. So on the safety public nuisance type of codes, we feel those need to be enforced. But we feel there needs to be discussion from council on those we would categorize more on that personal nuisance side. And these are some examples.
A building inspector is very like, this is the code. It is very hard to tell a building inspector, that person has a space heater, they're probably okay. Because the building inspector is going to say, I'm sorry, that's not what the code says. And Eric is going to say, really, that's a council decision. If council wants to ignore part of a code they've adopted, that has to go to council. And so that's what we're talking about. And so it's things like non-fire risk hoarding. So your house is just sort of a disaster versus trash and weeds in the yard, which is an eyesore to your neighbors and potentially like insects and rodents. An unfinished house, like maybe you just have sheetrock and, you know, no finished molding or no paint or, you know, nothing's done versus having a failing roof that's potentially compromising the safety of your home. You can't heat to 68 degrees versus electrical issues that could cause a fire, plumbing issues like no hot water, and then feces outside because there's no plumbing. So those are very like, this is difficult for you to live in this home versus this is a real danger to you or a danger to the public. Okay, and so this is it. If we dial down and we think about that very first slide, which this is what the code requires to consider a property habitable, these are the sticking points for my department. So how much does council feel strongly that we have to have a continuous heat source? Are we comfortable with just letting people have wood stoves and space heaters? And oftentimes we're not getting complaints about things like that. It's that we're there on a different thing and we notice that. And then it's like we have an obligation to start having a conversation with them. But it's the difference between, I mean, I think we all know what a real HVAC system, like if you have to put in a whole furnace system, you're talking about $10,000. Like you're nodding because it's true, it's very expensive. Okay, plumbing. If you have running water and a working toilet, and you're not going potty in your yard, Do we require you to have hot water? Is you being uncomfortable and using cold water something that we want to get involved in? The code says you have to have hot water. Does the city want to enforce that? Safety. If you're a hoarder and, you know, if we don't think it's a fire risk, and again, we do have sort of like the criteria, can you get to exits, can you get to windows, are there flammables by your heat source? Like if those things are not triggers, are we going to keep dealing with hoarding? I will tell you that the co-responders, I think, have done cleanouts of hoarder houses at least 3 times. And I think at least 2 of the ones on the list are completely filled again. And so it's like we spent a pretty penny getting those properties cleaned, and we're right back where we started, because hoarding is one of the most serious and difficult to treat mental illnesses. And then safety, unfinished, unsafe wiring, electrical. This one is a little bit weird because it's like, yes, we can't have wiring that is potentially a fire hazard, but the developmentally disabled gentleman, he's got a couple like loose wires in a outlet or in a light fixture, right? So like probably those aren't going to burn his house down. But how far is the code? How far are we going to take that as the city? And then aesthetics. As Eric very astutely pointed out earlier, failing stucco does have the ability to compromise a building structurally, but not always. If you have a masonry house, if you have a brick house, and you have failing stucco, it just looks bad. Your house isn't going to fall down. Peeling paint. If you have, you know, if your fascia is peeling paint and decaying wood, if your fence is decaying wood, how far do you want the building code to go? And we just need some guidance, because the building code says we have to enforce all of this.
And we'll come back to these slides when it comes time as prompts. So when we're talking through these, then the next question that comes up is, again, how then do we get enforcement done? And the question is, do we want a contract for work to be done? So at a minimum, we feel like if we're going to contract for work to remediate a nuisance because it's not getting done any other way, that a lien should be placed and foreclosed on because we're using public money. Like, we do not have a program that's like, let's just go fix up people's homes because they're poor and they need help. We don't have that set up. We may sometime in the future have stuff that has criteria. What kind of help do we offer? How do we help with banks? All of that. But without anything like that, if we're spending public money, it should be understood that we will expect to try to get that back because it's public money. So that first category that we covered, the financially resourced property owners, we already talked, the best route for compliance is to do the fines. So if it's not getting done, they get multiple fines. That gets turned over to collections as one route, and then they can get their wages garnished, their assets, anything like that, or we can turn it into a lien. We haven't actually spent city money other than the officer's time running it through municipal court, but we haven't spent money beyond that. So there's not much risk to the city. So that's why that's an easier category to address. The harder category is the judgment proof, because the fines are not going to be successful in getting action. So then the question is, how do we still then take care of that nuisance issue? Because what the judge can do is the judge can say, fix it by this date, or else the city can't. Well, if we go in there and we spend $10,000 of public funding, and we then expect to issue a lien, are we at risk? What is our risk? Because there's a thing of the super priority lien. So if it's not related to rubbish and those types of things, it is not a super priority lien, which means if there's a mortgage on the property and we spent $20,000 and we go to close it, that mortgage takes priority over us, and they can choose not to pay ours if the mortgage then takes over ownership of the house. So we're out public funding of $10,000 to $20,000. So our thing is, the first test is to determine if there's a mortgage or a type of lien. Because if there is a mortgage on the property, then what we need direction on is we probably need to keep the limit of what we're spending for public dollars low. Because we don't know if they're upside down. They may have a mortgage for more than what the value of the property is. They may have a mortgage that's up to 75%. And like, we don't know, and you don't know until you've done the work and issued the lien type of situation. If there's not a mortgage, then that means maybe we can spend a little bit more in order to get the situation fixed, issue the lien. We would anticipate it doesn't get paid. Then we do the foreclosure, we hold on to it for 3 years, we go through that whole process, and then we get the property, and then we can turn around and sell it. So there's a bit of a cash flow type of situation. It is, though, taking care of what the situation is, and in 3 years, get something back into the housing market type of thing. But we don't think we need to go all gangbuster either. We probably think, let's look at what the assessor's value is of the home, maybe not spend more than what 50% is of that, because there's a process, all of those types of situations. Now, these are starting points from a discussion perspective. But at the end of the day, this is why it became really complicated, because if we can't do fines, which is our easy way of getting people to do what they're supposed to do, our officers, our community is still left with these structures that are very much creating a nuisance, and in some instances creating public health issues as well, type of thing. So did I cover this, Eric and Rachel? Okay, I think we have one more slide and then we can start opening it back up.
I think this one's Eric.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, merely because this is municipal court stuff. So we currently have fines that are in our nuisance codes. We have a nuisance code for weeds, trash, and rubbish. And what happens there is you get a talking to by an officer, and if you don't get something fixed up in whatever the officer's reasonable amount of time, and it's usually a fair amount of time, then you'll get a notice of violation, which is a formal notice that says you have the following violations on your property. You have 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is to fix it, or else we'll issue a notice of violation. Then the subsequent visit happens, it's not fixed. Issue a citation, and they are cited into municipal court. And for those kinds of violations, for weeds, trash, and rubbish, the council has adopted a fine schedule that your first offense is a $500 fine and your second offense is a $1,000 fine. Those are super priority fine liens. So if they don't pay those fines, that gets certified to the treasurer as a lien, and super priority means it is senior. Doesn't matter whether there's a mortgage or anything else on that property. Our lien is senior to everything else except general property taxes from the county. So that's what council already has in place for weeds, trash, and rubbish. But the kinds of violations that we're talking about that are code violations, property code violations, like the International Property Maintenance Code that would require you to keep your house up, or the various building codes that require you to have heat and plumbing, we don't have set fines for those. The international codes say you can assess a fine, but there's no fine amount. So we could put fine amounts into our community court fine schedule, which council adopts and changes periodically. And the suggestion would be we make the property code fines mimic those that we already have in place for the trash and rubbish related fines. But you can make it anything you want.
So hopefully this felt very simplistic, but it took us a long time to get to this point of being able to present it.
Well, because we kept going down rabbit holes with each other. So now we invite you all to go down rabbit holes.
Or not, but please, it's open for discussion. Mayor, I know we don't have the microphones, so I don't know how you guys want to get the mayor's attention as far as asking
So
questions.
what I was thinking was, if we go back to that slide with the questions you have for us, and then we could start with Councilor Carson, if he wants to go first, and let him tell you his thoughts on how he feels about each one of them, and then we just go around the room like this, and then I'll wrap things up on the first round, and then that way everyone has a chance to speak, because this is pretty touchy. and I don't want anyone to be interrupted while they're speaking. If that's okay with you all, you think that's fair? Carson, would you like to go first, or would you like for Jackie to go first?
Yeah, you guys can go out. I'm thinking about many things. Go ahead.
Okay, so, Counselor Jackie Beal, we'll start with you, and then we'll, go all the way around, and we'll get Counselor, Jan Beal in the next two.
And Mayor, is this, if she has questions even outside of this slide, would be the right time to ask as
Yes.
well? Okay.
And that way we get most of the thoughts out, because by the time we all go around, most of the time we get some stuff we want to talk about.
Okay. So on the heating part, I know a lot of people that have wood stoves. And that's their main source and only source of heat. And the way I feel about it, should we enforce that or not? But because I'm thinking that for that, no, because that's their main source of heat and sometimes only source of heat. Space heaters are scary. You know, they're fire hazards. So for sure that. For plumbing, I mean, I guess I work in a county that doesn't have hot water a lot of times, you know, where they live, but they do other things like heat water and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of iffy on that one. Let's see. Hoarding, I guess that's a rough one. I mean, there's a lot of people that do hoard, but if it's something that affects like the fire department having to go in there and maybe save somebody and you can't get through the hoarding that, then I'm kind of like, yeah, we should enforce that for sure. And then the wiring, that's always scary. So I think that's a big fire hazard also. So I think that should be enforced. Aesthetics, I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on that because I mean, I know that a lot of people don't maintain their properties that way, but if it was a neighbor of mine and I had to live next to that, I would definitely want it enforced.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
Jackie or Counselor Beal, so on the fire risk hoarding, so our recommendation is if it is a fire risk hoarding, we want to enforce. The question is for the lower level hoarding, non-fire, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that we should.
Okay, so that's what I was interpreting, but I wanted to make sure.
Then I have questions about, so you talked about, you know, going in and fixing these properties that are structurally safe. Do we have monies to do that?
So what we've had in our budget is a line item, and we used to actually put, I want to say 50 to 100,000 in there to abate nuisances. And mostly that was exterior, the weeds, an occasional maybe demolition or something like that. But what we realized is we'd go multiple years without spending that. And then we do a year where we would go above that. So what we decided is we lowered it to like 10 or 15 or 20, something like that, that's lower, knowing that we would do a budget amendment if we had a year of there's a lot of enforcement and we needed to take care of structures. So if, depending on how we feel the trends are going, depending on what direction we get from council, we'll probably evaluate what we look at doing in that line item.
We have overspent it every year that I worked for the city, so you're welcome.
So another question, is there any programs, grants, anything that could be utilized to make these houses safe? And
so one of our long-term goals is in the housing plan is to establish a program that could help people stay in their homes. But their criteria of how to qualify, we want to make sure we're not replacing banks. So is there a way the bank can give a lower interest loan if we're helping in a different way? Like there's still pieces that need to be brought together for that. And there may be potential grants that we can go after to help us make that. But that's not in place and it won't be in place this year. I don't know if we'll have it in place for next year. But it is the next thing we want to start doing from a housing plan.
I think these conversations are happening everywhere because of the housing crisis. And so I think the state is starting to really pay attention. So I would anticipate there will be grant programs in the next few years.
But I do think Dawn Melgaris she's able to tap into some funding, already has a criteria program for some homes that need certain types of repairs.
We do, and we have a brochure that we give everyone that has a notice of violation that violates one of these things. They get a brochure and it includes Dawn with the housing coalitions, housing rehab.
So can I add something, because I'm the president of that. So with that, the idea there is, I think you definitely let people know, but they don't follow through to do that. And so I don't want to get into the weeds, but there is something already in place to help people that they've got to go through and do it. And to be honest, if they're fitting this criteria of not being able to afford it, they're going to fit the criteria to get the grants. And we definitely are not using them all. I mean, so there's definitely ones open. So I guess I just would add that we do have something already in place in our area.
So my last comment too is, I really feel like we should enforce the codes for financially resourced for sure, and the vacant ones also. But I have problems with people who don't have resources, like the ones that are on fixed incomes due to SSI or not SSI. My comments.
Good. All right.
So just going down my thoughts, I had written down what about the outside accountants, but you addressed that in a nuisance type situation. Do we have a specific timeline? I know that at least from my time on the council, when we've gone after houses that need to be torn down, not necessarily these, but you mentioned the years-long process of getting them to comply. Is there a specific timeline to adhere to for that? And should there be one?
I don't think there can because it depends on what the issue is.
Okay.
So if it's a wiring issue and we talk to them and they seem motivated, it can take time to get an electrician to come and look to find out, and stuff like that. So, and then we'll go back and it turns out they haven't done anything. And so then we have to start doing a shorter time frame and then start kind of going through it. If it's an easier issue to fix, it could be a shorter time frame. So like each issue is different. Tonight's discussion, and if it requires a vote, depending on how the discussion goes, that might give us more tools to be more aggressive to accelerate the timelines.
Well, and also, I mean, council could provide us some direction on the timeline. So the way these things typically play out is someone will come into court eventually after months of dealing with just interacting with the CSOs and the building department. They finally get cited in court, and you get a court order that says you have a month to fix all these 10 things. Come back in a month, and they come back in a month and they fixed 4 out of the 10.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have a conversation before they come back, and we tell the judge they didn't do it, but they're making progress. Let's set it for further out.
Okay.
And so eventually, a year and a half goes by before all 10 things get done, or maybe they never get done. And council thinks that we need to shorten that. We can certainly we can shorten up the time that our officers work before they bring it into court, or we can shorten up the time that we are willing to ask the judge to give them.
But that's not a one size fits all. So
Right.
it's an overall direction of be more aggressive.
Yeah.
Well, and it's more not necessarily aggressive, but consistent, and I understand that it's a two-sided coin, really, because you want to be consistent with everybody, treat everyone the same in the city, but at the same time, you want to be able to give the CSOs and the courts the flexibility to be able to say they need 2 more months and they'll get this done, that type of thing. So, but it's just something to think about so that someone doesn't take advantage of the system or fall through the cracks. But it sounds like there's already parameters in place for that.
And I think what I'd like to just offer as a caveat too is when we're talking judgment-proof people, these are the ones that the fines aren't going to work.
Yeah.
Which means if we can't keep them kind of going and on the hook and all of that, then we have to step in and use city funding, and we start having some risk there type of thing. So there is some value to the city trying to avoid having to use city funds to get the situation fixed without letting it drag out too long at the same time.
I will also say that at this point, you are kind of deferring to the judgment of leadership at staff level. And so if there is an imminent safety risk, we are more aggressive and our timeline does move faster.
Okay.
But if it is just a nuisance and there aren't, like if the neighbors are very vocal and repetitive about a property, I mean, we're out there a lot, but it is one of those things where it's a little bit of a limited capacity thing. Like, Captain Birch and I are doing the best we can with relatively small staffs. It's kind of like the dark sky thing, but also like we do try to run both. I try to run my department with compassion. These are people's homes. And so I always tell people, if you're communicative with us, if we know that you're working on it, we'll work with you as long as you need.
My next question is, have you not researched, so to speak, but have you noticed other cities and any of the ideas that or programs that they've tried to address this with, or is this just now starting to pop its head up as being talked about issue among municipalities?
I think our housing rehab program, so the one that we have technical assistance from DOLA on how to help people fix their homes.
Okay.
We have a lot of research on that. I don't think that I know of any jurisdictions where they're just sort of choosing to ignore parts of the code. I think there's not a formality to that. Like, I think jurisdictions do it, but I don't know if they necessarily bring it to council.
Oh, okay.
But we just wanted that extra level of, are we going to enforce the letter of the code? Is that fair?
Yeah, we haven't researched it, so I don't know if they've had these conversations in other municipalities.
I do think that Tyler looked into it a little bit.
And then you answered my education thing, and you're looking at. I don't think at this time a code change would be. It would just be a Band-Aid to try and change any code except for. So then getting into the specifics of this slide.
We're not recommending a code change.
Okay.
I want to make sure that's clear. What we're asking is, these are all existing code.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want us to enforce these for judgment-proof individuals? So, like the hoarding, do you want us to enforce the code as it's written for hoarding, even though it covers lower level non-fire risk? Or do you only want us to do the fire risk?
Well, I think for any of these, and I'll skip from hoarding, but like let's say wood stove, and going back to the room of everybody knows the wood stove. I think if we decide not to enforce that, I think that needs to be across the board non-enforcement. I think the people that can afford it that have a wood stove should be treated the same as those that can't afford it and have a wood stove. I think that's the fairest way to do that. Having said that, I think as far as space heater, absolutely not. But for wood stove, my opinion is if it was installed correctly and if it was installed by a person that knows how to certify wood stoves, and you see them in houses for sale where they're isolated, they're lifted up, they have proper venting, the whole 9 yards. I'm sure there's some way to prove it was installed by.
Well, wood stoves are fine. The question is, if you don't have a central heating system, and all you had is a wood stove, or all you had were space heaters, that's the problem. I mean, you can have a central heating system that you never use, that's what I have. I have a central heating system, but in the winter, I run a wood stove because I like it. But if I just chose to run the central heating system, it's there, it would work.
Yeah.
The issue, so if you've got someone with financial resources to make sure their building does have that central heating system, whether they use it or not, or whether they have wood stove in there or not, isn't the question. It's, they have the capacity to meet the code with their central heating system.
And the benefit is it keeps that structure to code type of thing. There is a benefit to having it.
Oh,
Okay, but keep going.
no, that's fine.
And so
That would be my only
you're
thing.
kind of talking about fairness and selective enforcement, I think, and that's a real issue here, because what we're asking you as a council is, what priorities should we have? Because we can't enforce every element of the code against every building in the city of Alamo. Most of these can't do that. And so whenever you're enforcing anything, you're going after your biggest problems first, or where you can have the most impact first.
What does that mean?
That means no.
No, I've been trying to,
No.
she jumped in.
You had an opportunity to go first.
This,
I told you.
this isn't about the comments of that. This is the structure of the work session time. She didn't remember what was talked about earlier because we're going too far and we're not. No, this is, we're gonna have to talk about this at the retreat. At the retreat, we're gonna have to. Structure of work session is messed up.
I'm trying to make sure everyone get their thoughts out. To be fair, I gave you the first.
Did you talk to Liz like that a while ago?
What Liz.
When she jumped in? No, you didn't.
What Liz did was follow up on what she said. Go ahead and put it back. Council, do not interrupt. That's what happens.
I said, I'm sorry.
Counselor Krebs, so you were at the wood stove. I didn't know if you wanted to go down any of the other items.
I can do it very briefly. I'm fine with them not having hot water,
Okay.
as long as there is running water in it. But the safety issue, I don't want, well, the unsafe wiring is an obvious, but for the non-fire risk hoarding, I have to leave that up to the professional. If they have parameters in place that they can walk into a place and deem it at a certain level, like we saw in the pictures, I don't want to overstep on that. So as long as they know and their people are trained in what to recognize, I think I would assume, and so I'll just ask for clarification, over and beyond the non-fire risk, that the EMS and the police are also trained to recognize the different levels of the hoarding and to have those conversations.
So I have some experience concerning hoarding in unkept conditions versus hoarding conditions that are extreme, in both fire and medical type situations. I think one of the biggest things is if it's pathways, anything over waist height is going to be an issue, because that can fall and trap you and create some issues as it relates to making access and also getting out. But the other thing is a lot of people don't necessarily make pathways. They just collect and just garbage. And when you start getting, papers, cans, and just garbage about a foot deep, then you start having an actual movement issue. You're actually slipping on and you can't get out. And that's an issue. And I think that's something we're going to have to talk about is what is the definition of non-fire risk, or as it relates to severe fire risk.
To answer your question, Doctor, we don't need EMS and other individuals to be trained. If they report what they think is a potential hoarding issue, we can go in, look at it, and deem if we think it's at the level of the fire risk or if it's a lower level type of thing.
Would you at that point have the ability to bring the co-responders in to try?
Yes,
to
we will
mitigate?
connect them. Yeah, we are connecting them beyond anything. Yeah.
Right. And as far as aesthetics go, the outside is, go for it. So, because there's an expectation when you live in a neighborhood that your house should be. in
When I
similar
listen to
conditions.
you, it sounds like you are very much on the same page of Jackie. The one area I have you maybe a difference of opinion is, you are maybe leaning towards these differences of enforcing, but it's across the board, regardless of financial ability. Whereas when I listened to you, it was, let's enforce for financially resourced and vacant, and these little nuances would only apply to the judgment-proof occupied. Is that an accurate statement?
I think it is. I think
Okay.
if we tell someone
Okay.
it's okay to have a wood stove in place of an HVAC system, I think that would also apply for those that can afford the fee versus those that can't. Depending if they just purchased the home and just moved in and found out for the first time it didn't have heat type thing. I don't know. Thank you.
So I think, so I'll start there. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I also think though it needs to be across the board, not just for those who are judgment proof. Because again, you don't know people's finances. They may appear to be doing fine, but maybe they can't even get a loan to, so whatever it might be. So I think for me, that would be there. I do have a couple of questions and concerns. So being on the Housing Coalition, one of my concerns is where is the limit in regards to when we start talking about helping out? Because I'll tell you now is for most of the houses that we do have to do, we're even looking at, is it even the value of the house, things like that. So for example, if an electrician goes in there and the minute they start touching electrical, if it's not up to code legally, they have to then get everything to
So
code.
let's go to the next slide, Holly. So one, I want to make sure we don't use the language helping out.
Okay.
Because it's to fix the nuisance with the intent of filing the lien and getting either it paid back or we're getting the property. And so then if we are going to spend city money, our first question would be, is there a mortgage or a lien involved or not? If there is, we think the limit if we spend city funding should be very limited because we run a risk of not getting it back. So we're not helping them. We're trying to get the issue taken care of. If there is no mortgage, we just threw out, find out what the assessor's value is of the home. And if the cost is going to be more than 50%, we don't do it. But if we threw that out as a placeholder. So if you feel like it should be 20%, whatever it is, but we identify what we think the value of the home is and don't do any work above a certain percentage.
I think with a lot of these homes that we're looking at that are the high ones, I don't think you're going to be able to do it within the 20 to 50% is the concern. So that's just something I thought I'd bring up. The other thing then is, I guess, I kind of feel like since we have a resource here, I feel like we should then say you use this resource. And I guess my question is if they don't, then can we say then we're gonna, I don't know if it's something you can say it's uninhabitable or, if they're not willing. Now, let's say they get turned down by the Housing Coalition for some reason, then maybe having something there. But since we have a resource here, until they use up all their funds, my thought is they should be using the resources we already have. And they do it. And there's even ones where it's no interest. It's a pretty good setup. But if they're not going to go to that level to try, then we're just giving them an easier out? I guess I'm just trying to think that through, and us putting city or taxpayer money to it when there's another resource. So I'm not saying I'm against it 100%, but I do have some concerns and some caveats there. And like I say, being on the Housing Coalition, it is in the last, I'd say 5 to 6 years, maybe 7 years. And you probably know this too, the expense for any repairs or doing, like part of us, there's times I'm like just, oh my gosh, can't we just tear it down and start over? And I know that's not, but it's sometimes almost cheaper to do that, but unfortunately that's not the way it can be done.
So what I wrote down is, because I'm not sure we can solve it tonight.
Yeah.
But I wrote down that I think we need to go back and brainstorm on if the costs are going to be more than the house is worth.
Yeah.
And do some additional brainstorming on that.
And so then what would that solution be? Especially, and I definitely have, especially those, like a couple of the situations you brought up, and is there an alternative? I'm not one to say I just want to keep people out on the street either, but at the same time, I feel like putting $100,000, if that's what we're saying, is gonna cover maybe 2 houses. And so then how do we pick and choose?
And I don't know if we'd ever do that much, but
Yeah. But that's why, so if you go into a house and you say, okay, so maybe that's my question. So chances are, when you go into a house, they don't just need one thing. They need a whole, they basically need a lot of stuff. So then are you picking and choosing? And obviously if you go off that list, but like I say, very likely there's gonna be electrical involved if it's to this level. And I will tell you, the minute you open that electrical, so as electricians, what they have to do, the minute they touch it, then they have to go to code. And so that becomes a whole can of worms. If they don't touch it and they're blind to it, then it's not a big deal. But there are certain things, and plumbers are in the same boat, and those are the 2 major expense things.
so that still exists, so we need to think through that. But I will also say a little bit of this discussion will allow some of this stuff to move forward. So for example, if there is consensus that we don't care about hot water, then that means we don't need to check for that when we go in there. If there's consensus that this wood stove is okay, then we don't even have to look at the electrical. So a little of this will relieve some of it, but yes, if there is a major electrical problem, we know the electrician's gonna have to fix it up to code. It's just a matter of, do we even look at the electrical because there's a wood stove? Some of it will help us a little bit.
Okay, but anyway, so I guess, I don't wanna get into the weeds, but I have little concerns there, would like to flesh that a bit. On that other page, I'm fine with it. The only thing for me is I would also support that it's across the board, whatever we go with, it's across the board.
Okay.
I'm done.
So a couple of things on the previous slide. Heating, I think as long as we're able to heat the house, I think it should be okay. Wood stoves typically that's what most people use anyway, whether you have central heating or not.
Are you okay with space heaters? Or is that was more iffy for
Well,
others?
space heaters, it kind of goes to what she was talking about. Space heaters are fine if your electrical is good. But if your electrical is bad, then they have a risk of being fire breathing. So, as far as plumbing goes, I think hot water in houses, not in businesses, pretty much a convenience thing. You can bathe with cold water, you can warm it on the stove or whatever you need to do like they used to do. Safety, hoarding is, a diagnosed mental disorder. And so there are a number of different types of hoarding. There's, they call it ladybug hoarding, where you hoard a lot of stuff, but it's hidden. So it looks like a clear house, but they just have crap everywhere in the closets and stuff like that. And then they have the hoarding where it's just stacked everywhere, and it creates a safety issue. So I think we would need to look at what the fire department wants to consider fire risk hoarding. Aesthetics, kind of go into what Councilor Hensley said. You don't know what's going on with people. They could be considered financially resourced because they have a job, but their job hasn't kept up with inflation, which is the case with a lot of people these days. And then, really loving fines against them, and they can't pay their bills as it is. Now they have this fine coming up. Now they're going to get garnished. They can't pay their electricity bill. So now they're not going to have electrical because we've started garnishing their wages. So I think that kind of creates an issue. And, I think that's kind of an issue there. Just in my opinion, I think that going with the housing authority and trying to find grants or educating people about the grants that they have available, I think would be a good way of handling that. But, like Ty said, the cost of building anything sometimes, and cutting back to what you said, is greater than you say you build a house, and as soon as it's done building, it's not worth what you paid to build it. And the housing market being what it is right now, there's starting to a lot more inventory popping up, so it's gonna drop price of housing. So, you know, we're gonna have people spend more money to do whatever, it creates an issue. I don't know if that makes any sense. But, so there's that. You can go to the next one. Kind of discuss that, mortgage or not. You have people that paid off their houses probably years ago, and that affects seniors who probably can't get another mortgage or refi. Maybe they can get a reverse mortgage, but nobody's going to lend the money at 60 because they're not going to work, you know, till they're 90. Maybe they will, but that makes it more difficult to find the resources to take care of that stuff. So I just think that it's kind of an issue, and just what it's going to look like to a lot of people is the city's trying to sell their house. Once you put the liens on and start saying we're gonna foreclose, it's going to look like the city starts trying to steal their house. That's just how it's going to look. Vacant properties, you know, it's vacant. We should get them out on the market. I agree, 100%. But the houses that people are living in, I think we need to work with.
I need to push back a little bit. So the areas we're asking if you want to be a little more lenient are areas we've deemed to not be of a safety and all those issues, right? So
which I said,
which is all those others. So you're good with those and you want those across the board. The other codes, staff has every expectation of enforcing, and that if they don't do it because the fines aren't working, are you saying you don't want us fixing the problem?
I'm not saying we don't fix the problem. I'm saying we work with people.
Well, we always work with people, but then they sometimes don't want to work with us. So my thing is when us working with them gets us nowhere, and we have a situation that is presenting a life health issue, either for the person living there or on the neighborhood, we don't recommend spending money unless we're going to do the lien. And what I'm kind of hearing you say is spend the money, but don't do the lien.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, that's what I
was
just want
saying
to.
we need to find ways to work with the housing coalition
Okay.
and homeowners and stuff like that, because otherwise it's going to look like the city's trying to steal.
Okay, but if all of that does not work out, which is a lot of times what happens, we do the process, which is we got to get the situation fixed, and then we issue the lien, and then because some of those situations are more than just is it warm water or not, it's these other things.
Right.
Okay.
And the situations where it's life and safety, then by all means we need to.
Okay. After working with them, after all of that, okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't reading more into what you were saying.
I'm just looking at what it's going to look like to people, and then, you know, one person talks and another person talks, and it's going to affect people in our districts and where you live, in our wards, and where you live. I mean, so we're going to hear about it. I know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I would say there's 6 houses on this list right now. So there's probably 24 houses on our long list of ongoing code enforcement. There's 6 of these, like, we're not making any progress on these houses. And they're all over town. So they're in all the wards.
Anything else, Mark, on these lists?
Carson?
If we don't work through the presentation as they're giving, we're not having a discussion, we're getting hammered with a bunch of information, and then at the end, we're trying to remember and we're stepping back. That's the point I was trying to make. I'm sorry that I got pissed, but the email that we saw today about you saying no about everything, it already makes us look like bullies. And when you're making me feel like that in here, it's not okay. We need to be able to work through these things. She had a different view of the wood stove issue because it was 20 minutes ago. And that's what I was trying to say, is for work sessions, we need to be having a discussion, not getting told what we're gonna do. Can't vote tonight anyway. And then at the end, trying to scramble. It's not working, it looks bad, and it's not conducive to a good conversation. We're trying to work through an issue that's complicated. That's what I was trying to tell you. I concur with Mark about 100% on what he said. I grew up in a house with a wood stove, so I mean, we did have central heating, but wood stoves, I think. So I'm gonna go ahead and just for the sake of time and discussion, concur with him. I think our CSOs and our officers are perfectly capable of making a call when something's dangerous and unsafe, and you know what I mean? And so they're using judgment that I trust their judgment. But some of these issues, like Mark said, are just a little bit touchier, and I think, or even just some of them are conveniences, like somebody said. There's plenty of houses that don't have hot water, so I'm gonna have to concur with him on just about everything he said there. I don't know where any of these houses are. If people are living in some of those pictures you showed, it's pretty rough. So I will say that. The one thing I did want to talk about earlier, and that's why I got annoyed, is because if we use a system where we're providing a service through this process, which we do, you know, we've had the CSOs clean out houses and they fill them up again and that. If you're using that kind of help as a service and saying, look, we're helping you do it this time, and you're charging for that, that's an easier way to, how do I put this? It changes the aesthetics of the fund. Changes it from, you know, we don't have to invest hundreds of or tens of thousands of dollars into cleaning a home up. But if we're helping someone get even somewhat compliant, instead of just going and doing it for free at the beginning, we start imposing some sort of cost there. And then even from a vacant standpoint, instead of just bringing a hammer down and saying, you know, we're going to fine you, we're going to help clean this so it's not, if the CSO is getting some sort of safety hazard issue, we fix the issue and then fine them that way. You understand what I'm saying? Like, instead of just saying we're going to fine you.
Yeah, that's the lien, really, is what.
Yeah, you know, and that's why I say we don't want to be banks, but if we're putting liens, we're already functioning as a bank almost anyway, right? Is that kind of the same way? So what I'm saying is in some of the extreme cases, and I'm not trying to get people kicked out of their homes either, I don't want to, but in some of the more extreme cases, if you're applying the cleanup or the fix for a price, then I guess that's the fine you levy instead of just a flat fine. Because from the aesthetic, I mean, does that make sense? Or what do you think of that, Chief? I'm just asking, like, does that sound dumb or?
So no, I'm going to interject. I think it's inappropriate for us to expect our CSOs to clean up people's.
No, not a CSO, but it's like a contractor.
Okay, so that's what
I meant the CSO makes a call and says, hey, this is a safety issue. This needs to get addressed now. You're going to fall through the floor in front of your toilet.
Okay, so I'm glad we're clarifying this.
Yeah, no,
so,
I didn't mean for the officer.
So when we talk through this on if they're not going to fix it, what scenarios do we use city funds to get it fixed? That is us hiring a contractor to go in and clean it. That is us hiring someone to take care of the wiring. That's city funds that are being spent that we are saying that should be paid back. And they can either pay it back without having to go through a long drawn out process, or we issue the lien and all of that kind of stuff. But we're not just dishing out city funds.
No, I know, but how long does that take? Like, how long if you write a ticket? Like, let's say you go to a house and you write the first ticket for the guy with the toilet. You know what I mean? Like, that's an immediate safety issue, right? That should be addressed right
So
away.
then, if we would issue the ticket for whatever, the notice of violation, whatever, and then it would work its way through the courts, and, you know, usually first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, they end up in court, and then it goes through the court process with.
Oh, it's a lot longer.
Yeah, it's a lot longer. So there's a notice of violation process, which then, once that's issued, but there could be a week or two buffer in between trying to get compliance prior to the NOV. NOV notice has a 7 to 10 day limit of them to comply with the NOV.
Yeah,
There are times CSOs go outside of the scope of that because of financial issues, et cetera, all the stuff that we talked about tonight. And then after the non-compliance of the NOV, the issuance of a failure to abate citation is given, which then starts the court process, which again.
And they don't appear in court, that the citation says you got to appear in court next month sometime. they fail to appear, then they get a notice that says you failed to appear. Now you gotta appear next month. They fail to appear. Then a warrant gets issued saying you get brought in and you have to give a bond that you're gonna appear if they fail to appear. And so it goes a long time.
Okay, so day before yesterday, we got a notice from Excel. Okay, they were gonna shut power off to mitigate fire risk, right? In a situation like that today, like just say they high fire bans or all this stuff, you got a home with exposed wires everywhere that could catch fire. If you see that, isn't that an immediate fire risk? Is it not? Like, was not that something that we can address?
So I guess
In
when
a
we
more
talk
expedient
wiring, what we were thinking on wiring is you have wiring that's severely unsafe and is a fire risk. That needs to be addressed. But then you've got two wires sticking out that if they were just capped and nothing else is done with it, can we just call it good? Like, there's a difference of the wiring, but the code does not differentiate.
I know, and so
Okay.
that's where like this gets into this area where you're asking us, you know, are we more lenient with the wood stove? I think the wood stove is something you're lenient on because it's a tradition. Around here, wood stoves have been used for hundreds of years. Exposed wiring, I get what you're saying about the code and going, you have to be all in immediately, you know what I mean? Once he touches it, he has to be compliant. Is that an area where we're more, like, do we have the ability to be flexible in an electrical code? Because I would say if you have your scenario where the two wires are out, that's okay. If you have wire outside that's exposed or sparking and you have foliage around, I mean, you know, there's two extremes, but.
So one, we're not electrical technicians, right? So we don't have the same obligation of what then Liz has been talking about. So if our code person goes and looks at it and is like, put two caps on it, you don't need to look at the rest of the wiring, then are you guys okay with that? That we don't go any further because they've got a wood stove and all of that? Or even with two wires that could easily be capped, do you want us enforcing the code that says that has to go further?
One houses, there's just a bunch of light fixtures on the ceiling that are uncapped and there's loose wires in them. So they're probably not gonna spontaneously ignite, but they need to be taken care of. And I agree with Liz that if we hire an electrician to take care of it, we might be opening a can of worms. I also think it's important for you to know on like the CSOs going in and cleaning up properties, the price tag attached with those cleanups is usually somewhere between $5,000 and like $10,000. They're hugely expensive.
Oh, no, I know, especially even like you say, bag abatement is super expensive, but there's situations where I just feel like we're tying the CSO's hands and tying the officer's hands if we have to drag something that could literally, I mean, there's some situations we've seen them for years and they've been bad, but in extreme cases, I think the officer's gonna have the ability to make that or to notice it right away. I mean, if it's that extreme, but I mean, I don't know, I'm not, again, like the cop, you know, they're not.
It's gonna end up on my desk.
Yeah,
That's where it's gonna end up. It's gonna end up with my building inspector and with me.
And what we're trying to do is to have you guys loosen the hands to allow staff to have discretion. That's what this is about.
It is whether or not you trust my judgment and my staff's judgment enough that we can go in and say, all right, you don't have a continuous heat source that keeps your house at 68 degrees. We're not going to issue a we're not going to issue a notice of violation for that because clearly you've got a wood stove. So you're warm, you're fine. We're not getting involved in your personal comfort because right now the code doesn't give us the ability to make those judgment calls. The code says you have to have hot water. And if my building inspector says, the code says you have to have hot water, I don't have a leg to stand on. Whereas in really, like, I joke that like Eric and I are old hippies and we're like, oh, it's your personal choice to be uncomfortable, you know, like, and that's where we land, but it's not our decision to make it stop.
So that's what tonight is are you comfortable in some of these areas that we feel that there's not a life safety, that we feel like there's not this huge impact on the neighborhood. It's more of this personal comfort nuisance. Are you okay allowing us to have more flexibility than what the code currently allows? That's
Yes.
what that is.
Yes, barring that you get into a situation where we're gonna demo a house, like Mark said, or something like that, we're involved, or that comes on the radar.
Again, these are all structured, or structurally sound.
You know, like Wilma's house, for example, something like that, just from a, you know, a public backlash or, you know, an aesthetic, you know what I mean? Like, from that standpoint, just as long as something like that isn't going to go off without us being able to do some sort of preemptive damage control or talk. Like that, because that is, you know, it can really look ghoulish if you have the city. If you think people think the city's coming after homes. You know what I mean? The thing with Will, it's it, right? A lot of people on the street, especially after he died. You know what I mean? And so that was the aesthetics of that situation. I would really not like to.
Well, I think us bringing to you guys first that we are at the point where we're getting ready to demolish homes actually worked out, because I think you guys got to experience firsthand how much people reach out, how much people try to get them to do something, how many times we try to get family to get them to do something, and it still doesn't happen. But for you guys to be able to experience that and be able to talk to the public from a firsthand perspective, I think was good.
Thank you.
So can I ask one question of Councilor Carson? So there's a lot of consistency. I know you said you everything Mark said, but Councilor Martinez, but everything he said was consistent. The way I heard it with every other council member. The only area there might be a slight deviation is, do you feel like this loosening and allowing a little bit more discretion, do you feel like that is across the board regardless of financial resources or not?
I mean, I think educating people is important, because right now we've deemed at this table right now that there is financial resources out there. You know what I mean? We're not saying you're on SSI, or even, you know, again, a lot of people out there, their job ain't making the ends meet. So as long as we as a community have the ability to give this homeowner a place to go to get that loan or that money, I mean, even go as far as, you know, kind of helping them along sometimes, which we've done. I think that's there. You know what I mean? If you're on SSI and you're broke, you're gonna qualify for ERC, or, you know what I mean? And if ERC already came in and fixed your house, you're not in this situation. You know what I mean? They've already kind of, so
I don't know if I asked the question correctly.
I know you did. I understand what you're asking me. I'm just having trouble saying yes.
I don't think you're understanding.
So,
Yeah, no, I do. I understand what you said.
okay,
But there is, am I wrong? Is
No,
there
I'm
not?
just saying,
Yeah, but-
I'm asking her to let you speak, because.
No, go ahead, Liz.
No. Go ahead, Heather, ask the question.
so when staff first started the presentation, the idea was we don't need discretion on the code for those homes that are financially resourced. We would enforce the full codes as written. Some council members feel like that, some council members feel like, though, it shouldn't matter if they have the resources or not. If we're gonna be flexible on the code, it's flexible on the code for everyone.
I agree with this.
You agree with this? Okay, so that's why I was,
I think
okay,
this is good work, and I agree with this.
okay,
I don't agree that
okay,
off of everybody's head.
okay,
I agree
that's,
with this.
okay, that's what I'll write down.
I also don't know if I understand if there's consensus on aesthetics, because I feel like it was yes, enforce aesthetics, and then no.
So Counselor Vito, I think was like kind of 50-50.
It was 50-50 because, you know, like I said, if they don't have the resources and the money to look or to fix or paint or stucco or whatever, you know, that's what made me go 50-50. But if you do have the resources and it's an eyesore and I live next to you, yes, you know.
Yeah, so I have, the area I don't have consensus noted is if we enforce it the same across the board. But as far as the different types of levels, Jackie's language was a little bit different, but reading her body language and stuff, I think there's consensus there.
You know, Councilor Carson?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Councilor Young,
Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, appreciate the discussion, appreciate all the work that staff did to this. I am really in line with Counselor Jackie Vigil and where she's at. I guess it's kind of nice. I always am one of the first ones to talk, but hearing you guys all talk, I kind of, I'm really close with what Jackie is saying. I don't think it's government's job to own a home or to put a lien on a home at any point. I think there should be major flexibility with someone who is poor. Like, I'm sorry, go away. Sorry.
That was cute.
I think there should be some major flexibility with people who are poor, can't afford it, or a senior citizen. Obviously, we should point them in the right direction with all the different resources that are around town, and just keep going to help these folks. And I think I covered it all. Thank you.
So Counselor Vito, I just want to double check. So kind of, there seemed to be that consensus on allowing flexibility in those areas. I'm hearing you say you're in line with those areas of flexibility.
Yes.
Okay, and then the area as far as applying the full code to those who are financially resourced, you're
Yes.
kind of aligned with Counselor Jackie Vigil and Counselor Carson.
100%.
Okay, thank you.
And on the aesthetics piece, I'm kind of the same way. Just if I can't afford to fix my crumbling drywall or my stucco, let's give me a break or point me in the right direction to help to fix it. Stuff like this. If I'm poor. Thank you.
anything else? Councilor Vigil?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Carson.
I have a question. Is there a way for you, as a city, do we have who's our lobbyist? A CML? CML's our.
For the most part, if we have issues here, either the mayor or I usually do it, or a department head can get permission to weigh in on something if it's consistent with the policy.
We should start talking about lobbying the state for a grant section on stucco, like stucco or home hardening, and get serious about it. Like even get like just hammer them on it, because right now that could be a kind of a place where we can force them to lend a hand and maybe repair some of these homes that are not up to the wildfire resiliency code. You know what I mean? Like they're giving us unfunded mandates. Why not push back in some of these areas and see if they would open up? Because if you come up with a wild idea in water, they'll open up funding. So, my point is there a way to lobby to CML and start thinking about them opening up monies or grants for communities to help with exterior hardening of homes? We'll just use that, not aesthetics, but exterior hardening of homes, which would try to give us the aesthetic we're looking at, but it would also help with the fireproofing. That's just a side note, but welcome for that.
Mayor, I know it's your turn, but I just also want to, we probably should have pointed out, and under this financially resourced, there kind of can be some different groups in there as well. There can be local people who we think are financially resourced. There are sometimes their own homes owned by banks, and some of the banks aren't even local, and we can't get them to do something. And so I just want to point that out as well, because that may feel different, and we probably were a little remiss in not pointing out that there is a difference there under financially resourced.
It's almost always banks, to be clear. It's almost, like, I can think of one instance where it's not a bank.
When you're saying a bank, like, what are you saying?
The bank owns the house.
Okay,
Yeah,
and they're not wanting to fix it.
yeah, they're
Yeah, I got
just
it.
sitting on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's totally.
I think before I go, let's just be clear, go around and ask them about that, because I think all of them probably have similar comment regarding if it's a financial institution who's holding the property.
For those who said no, does it
those who
change
said
it?
no, does it change anything in your opinion?
So-
I'll start off with Carson and then we'll go.
They already said it doesn't matter.
That's it.
Yeah, it's more,
I think you had.
Hold on, though, that's where I was going with the kind of contractor service to, like, let's say you have let's say you have wires that are falling in the yard, okay, a pole that's fallen over. That's an immediate safety hazard. Or some sort of exposed plumbing that's in that yard. You have a sewer line that's busted in the winter, okay, and it's in the property line, and it's in that yard, and the bank owns it. It's a safety issue for the neighbors, it's a safety issue for the neighborhood. If we send a contractor in there, that bill goes to the homeowner, right? It's already like that, we already have that in place.
yeah.
Okay, so that, as long as that's what I'm saying, is that a quick mechanism? We get them fined right away, that fine's on their schedule now and can be sent to collections.
There's some nuance, like we have to do a notification and then depending on what the threat is to the public. Like, so when we had the situation where the sewer was literally backing up on private property, we had to take quick action in that situation and maybe push the line a little bit. But if it's something that we can turn the water off, it stops the sewer, no one's living there, and they need to just fix it, that then is still something that's gonna have to get fixed, but we can maybe do a little bit better notice that you fixed it or we're coming in with the next number of days or something.
Not to be difficult, but what if there was a spill, a sewage spill, and it's in the yard and it stinks and everybody in the neighborhood's dealing with it? I'm just saying, you know what I mean? There's gonna be extreme cases.
The IPMC has a provision that the code official can say, this is an emergency, we're going in and fixing it, and we're gonna levy a lien. They don't need notices or anything.
I just wanted to make sure that was already said.
Can I ask a question when you talked about the bank zoning? So the way I understood it, if the banks own it, like what you're saying, that's more vacant stuff, correct? It's not the other. So maybe just to make clear, so for vacant, we do everything within our power to get that fixed. Like, so with that one, that's different. I was looking at when it's occupied. That's when I was saying that we shouldn't differentiate if you've got money or not got money, because we don't know people's personal financial situations, even if it appears they have money. So I was looking at everything from an occupied standpoint. From a vacant standpoint, do whatever we need to do to get it taken care of. So I don't know if that helped, because I think the bank-owned ones are the vacant ones, correct? Okay. Is that correct? Is that right?
They are, you're just we didn't separate out financially resourced over here. We should have separated out financially resourced into, probably bank-owned and non-bank owned.
Yeah, so my thing is, if
But
it's,
I'm hearing vacant's an entirely,
for
you
me,
don't care
vacant, do
for
what you need to
resources
do,
at all.
yeah, because to be honest, that's the, nobody's living in it, we're not kicking anybody out. Do what you need to get that taken care of.
Can we deviate a tiny bit? So just on this one question, Liz is saying, as it relates to vacant, regardless of resources,
Yep.
enforce the code. I'm
Yes.
seeing you nod your head, seeing you nod your head.
Yeah.
Counselor Vigil, Jan Vigil, okay, Counselor Jackie Vigil. Okay, so I'm seeing all heads nodded. Now, what about financially resourced, but it's not vacant? So what I heard is Counselor Carson, Counselor Vigil, and Counselor Vigil, even if it's not vacant, financially resourced, we still do full code. And what I heard you guys say is not, it's the same, it's the flexible.
Whatever the code, wherever we're allowing that flexibility, I feel that it should be done across the line. We shouldn't be the ones judging who has money and who doesn't.
Okay.
I agree with that.
So you got the, of course, just.
Good. All right. So, first of all, I want to thank all the council members for your comments and staff for this detailed presentation. I know it could be challenging and difficult for everyone to get your thoughts off. So thank you so much for being thoughtful. So, the first part is for staff flexibility. I do believe we should allow staff to have some flexibility, use like general common guidance of what to do. If you have a 2 hours and you can have it versus calling an electrician out there, or they need to put light bulbs in their chandelier or something. Yes, let them have that little flexibility, because once you do bring an electrician, you bring a plumber out there, like everyone has said, those are the 2 highest costs doing any type of repair whatsoever, and you could easily be over $20,000. So at some kind of point, I think we should also figure out how far we're gonna wanna go with a dollar amount. The other thing, there are programs out there, and I believe, like all of you brought up about the importance of education. I think we really do need to talk about like the ESD rural development. They have a housing program for people who are over 60 years old or 62, to where they'll give them a low interest loan of 2% to do repairs up to, I think it's $20,000, something like that. A reverse mortgage is probably one of the better mortgages to take out for people who are over age 62, to where if they don't have an income, they can do a reverse mortgage to where the bank may lend them up to 50% of the value of the home. Let's say a home is worth 100,000, the bank would lend them 50,000, and they don't have to make any reoccurring monthly payments. And the bank continues to. What happens is the balance is increased each year on what they own. Good thing about that is that when you do a reverse mortgage, the family members have to come in and be a part of that conversation. So a lot of these people who we're dealing with, it's going to be very helpful to see if they have family members to be part of the conversations when we're thinking about moving forward with paying for things to be done and hiring contractors and things like that as well. Even though we're not giving it to them, they need to know that. The other thing we mentioned, the Housing Coalition and ERC. Once again, those are things we need to start talking to people about, giving them those opportunities before we go to the next level of having work done. The other thing is when it comes to, there's a difference for me when it's an institution like a bank owned, like a real bank owned, and versus a person who has a mortgage. If it's bank owned, it means the bank foreclosed on that home, and now it's in their possession. So to me, the bank has the money to do those repairs. For me, 100%, no leniency. That's me. But if it's individually owned, and there's a different thing that what I would like most of you probably saying, is to consider finding a way to work it out with a person. If you go to that slide where it shows those different items, if you go to that slide real quick, I'll just give some of my ideas on some of these issues, okay? Go to the heating one. So that's the one right there. Okay. So I'm just gonna be real honest. In my lifetime, I have lived in all of these different type of housing situations with family members. I've been in a house where there was only wood stove, no gas heat, and I've been in houses to where you have the space heaters. When it comes to continuous heat, I understand for a safety code, but I believe there's some areas for flexibility with staff enforcing that. So I'm okay if they have just a wood burning stove. I'm okay with that. That's for me, as long as it's safe, in a safe place. I'm also I'm okay with space heaters to a certain degree, because it all depends on where the space heater is located and the degree and how close it is. If there are hazards close to the space heater, I don't think that's a good safety issue or concern. But if people, all they have is space heaters to heat their homes, and it looks good according to the people who go out there and inspecting it, and they don't see any issues with the wiring, I don't have a problem with space heaters to heat their homes. When it comes to plumbing and hot water, kind of like some of you said about the comfort level, I know I've been in houses where people heat their water up, and on the stovetop. And that's what they use to warm themselves, and yes, they're still able to take care of themselves. I'm okay with that if that's their way of doing things. Hoarding, as Mark mentioned, I've experienced this on a personal level with family members. It is some form of mental depression sometimes attached to the hoarding. I think if we can educate people in some kind of way, that's fine, but that's going to be a case by case basis, because what I found is that you can clean it out as many times as you want, but until you address the core issue that they're having, they're going to continue to hoard. That's what I've seen. So once again, that's a discretionary, I guess, use. I will trust staff to figure out. I know you're looking like you may have a question.
No, keep going. I've got questions at the end.
Okay. The unfinished, unsafe electrical wiring. Now that is a real hazard. I think if we see exposed, unsafe, like really unsafe, that's a difference between like the cap.
Yeah.
But seriously exposed wiring, of course, I think we have to move to another level of urgency, because that could cause a fire. The fire could cause, depending on how high the wind's blowing, it could affect everybody's in that general area, the safety of the house catches on fire. So I have another sense of urgency when it comes to unsafe wiring exposed. Aesthetics, I do believe we should enforce the aesthetics when it comes to peeling paint and stuccos to a certain degree. There are probably different grades or levels we can look at if we decide, okay, just because a strip of paint is falling out, does that mean we have to enforce it, or does it mean that the house hasn't been painted in 10 years, or probably some type of grading system to determine how we do that. If we do start enforcing these painting rules, I think we should at least consider some type of neighborhood volunteer program to where we can have volunteers to help paint people's houses so they're not incurring those costs. Maybe that might be a good option for that. It's just something to think about. Let's see. I think I covered it all. Decaying wood and carpentry, exterior aesthetics. I think we do need to make sure that we have some type of grading system to where if it gets to a certain point, this is when we step in. The other thing is we're going to use cities funds. I think it's going to be very important that we have the proper liens placed on the properties, so if those homes are ever sold, the city will be able to recoup the monies. That's what I have.
Let me just speak to that. That's not how the liens that we're envisioning work. So the liens that we're envisioning work are a tax lien. We expend the funds, we certify that amount to the county treasurer, they put that on the tax bill, and it goes. We don't wait until the house gets sold. The county treasurer then auctions off the tax lien and someone buys it. Us or somebody else buys it. When we say the city ends up owning, we're just talking about the city as the bidder on the tax lien.
Okay.
So it could be anybody.
I didn't understand that way when you said lien. I was taking it as a tradition.
Right, a traditional mechanics lien or something. We're envisioning a tax lien.
Okay, so I'm not sure if that changes anyone's opinion on anything, but I see what you're saying now with the tax. So it's immediate.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
3-year immediate.
Yeah, 3 year. Just like they do. Okay.
So if we go to, yes, thank you, Holly. Okay, so I wanna push a little bit more, just so you guys can understand the frustration we sometimes have from the staff code enforcement perspective. So what we've just accomplished is you guys have given us direction on some areas we could have more flexibility, which I think is really good. So now we're out in the world and we're not having to get on to somebody if they have hot water or not, right? We're not having to get on to people if they're using the stove and not electrical. So we've cleared that away. What we're still going to have is, let's say we've got a hoarder that is fire risk, right? So it's not an area we can turn away from type of situation. It's a structurally sound, they're judgment proof, and they have a mortgage. So we're not gonna get the money back. They're not gonna take advantage of other options. So then the frustration we face as staff is we have got this very real situation that if we don't feel it's appropriate to keep throwing tax dollars at, because we're not giving tax dollars to other individuals, right? The situation's there, the situation has to be fixed, but there's nothing, we don't have anything to get it done. And we'll keep trying to brainstorm, but that also means you guys are gonna keep getting calls. And we keep getting calls, and it's like, our hands are kind of tied. I don't know which one.
You can go first.
Okay, so you have a couple things there. I mean, you have the individual who is in a safety risk situation because they've created this fire hazard risk, and if there's a fire, the chief and the firefighters can't go in and save them. So that's a situation that should be addressed the same way our other mental health situations should be addressed. And if it's like an imminent danger thing, wouldn't we put someone on an M1 hold, or wouldn't we do something like that anyway to rectify it? Like, isn't there, I get the look, but how else do you do it?
Welcome to our society. So we are getting better, thanks to Stephanie, at better able to triage things. But an M1 is only a certain amount of time, and then they're released.
M5, you know, whatever.
But to get someone that may have to be permanently placed, because like we shared here, Blue Peaks won't take them. That's more of a voluntary type thing. There's that stuff. To get someone placed in a mental health hospital, that level that you have to prove is so much higher. I don't know if we could get this person in type of situation. You're shaking your head no.
Not on order.
Not on an order. So it'd have to be a voluntary, and that's probably not going to happen.
Now on it,
The constitutional protections, the thresholds you have to meet to get a court order to get someone placed into a mental health facility is pretty high.
So what's your pitch?
My pitch is we don't necessarily have the answer, and we don't feel it's 100% appropriate to keep throwing tens of thousands of public dollars at the situation.
So my question comment is that if we point them in the direction and even walk them, like that idea of trying to get them. So let's just use one example of the idea of whether it's a reverse mortgage, whether it's going to housing coalition, things like that. Now, obviously, if let's say they do the process and they go to housing coalition, and for whatever reason they do get declined, or there's something there, and we're trying to figure out things, and they are trying to help. I think in those situations, and obviously if we still have to do it, then potentially, I'd want a structure to it, but that idea of maybe there's something to do one of your ideas. But I guess my thought is what we've run into before too is people are not being proactive at all, even after the situation. So are we able to do similar? And I know this sounds harsh, and I'm just asking, so I'm not sure, but when we've had the drug situations and then eventually we kick them out because of.
So is that something?
What was that?
Nuisance house.
So my thing is, if they're truly not doing, if they're not trying, and and it's a nuisance house.
We would need to research some legality of stuff, but are you open to us trying to research if there's other designations we can give that when there's non-compliance type of situation, we explored what legally, potentially, creatively type of thing.
We can already condemn, and so we condemn all the time.
But we're tearing down a structurally sound house.
Exactly. And so that's the problem. And I will say this, like as much as I'm mushy on the inside, at some point, and not to discount what you're saying, because I have been part of taking a person's house. It is very, very hard.
Right.
But at some point, like these people are not obeying the social contract of living in a city and having a home and being a neighbor. At some point, if we've done multiple $7,000 cleanups of a hoarder's yard, at some point, the consequences, if they won't take resources, they won't comply, they keep making the same mistakes, it's this eternal drain on the CSO's resources. At some point, they should lose their home. At some point, that's a decision that they've made.
Either condemnation or some other way.
Like that is just, at some point, those are just the natural consequences for their actions.
Because if there's not a way to get the home out from them, which feels terrible, we are left with a life safety issue. We are left with the calls from the neighborhood. That's what we struggle with.
Can we put that slide back up that was the, in private nuisance versus public nuisance?
Yeah, because they're not the same. Don't do a thing and this person made.
I was just trying to use that.
No, I get
I
you.
wasn't saying.
That's why I meant we would do research to
Towards
see if
the
there's
end,
other categories.
I'd rather buy 'em out.
Last.
I get that's a weird one, but I'd rather buy them out.
That was it.
If they need to go to a facility or need to go to a care home,
No,
maybe
it's
if
like
you
fourth
make
to
a
last.
offer
There.
price for that, I would buy it
And
out
so
to
my
the
thing
city
there-
property, then they have money to.
So Michael, my thing there would be is that, yes, they should be able to sell their home or whatever, if they get money from it, but that it needs to be,
They need to be
Yeah, that doesn't-
motivated. We need to get them motivated
Right.
to sell their house. We don't need to buy their house.
Yeah.
We need to get them motivated to sell their house. But sometimes we can't.
No, but that's what I'm saying about the mental health part, okay, and the involving, because if it's a mental health crisis and you can't get them to stop hoarding, you're probably not gonna get them to work with a bank or a mortgage holder or something, you know what I mean? They're probably, and I don't know, I don't know how a hoarding person thinks, I guess, in that respect. But the cases that I'm thinking of, the two guys are pretty extreme. They're already at a point where they don't function well in society anyway. So at that point, you're gonna need that person, you're gonna displace them from their hoarding house, wherever they're hoarding, and you're gonna put them in the neighborhood. And they're gonna be on the street. And so that cause and effect there is going to have a horrible, horrible aesthetic from a public standpoint. So if you are gonna take them out of their home because they can't function, it would almost be better for us to figure out a way to compensate them for the home under some sort of fine tiered schedule. Okay, we've already got here, they already owe us $21,000 in cleanups because we've done it 3 times. You know, we'll give you so much percentage of fair market value. Here's this, you know, you can now stay at the bridge for a year, and it's after that, it's up to them to figure it out. But if we were able to pull something like that off instead of just pulling someone out of their home and throwing them into the street, I think it just has a much better human feel. You don't have to be soft on the inside to be a human being. You know what I mean? And so if you are willing to compensate, I get it. And I get that's rough and taxpayer money, but we're spending taxpayer money anyway. We're gonna have taxpayers telling us off when we're taking people's homes. So if we could figure out a way to soft pull them out, that would have a way better, probably final result to the aesthetic. And that guy that I'm thinking of probably would do pretty good in a care facility or need some sort of care, because I think his family looks out for him anyway, and they're struggling to do that. So that's just kind of an idea. Just think about that. If there is a way, if that's an avenue.
So, okay. Go ahead. So the part I'm taking is it worth seeing if they are willing to sell? If they are not, then there's so many then other issues we have to work through legally and constitutionally type of thing. So the issue is some of these individuals are not willing to sell.
A take is a take. You know what I mean? And so if we can make it look other than a taking of someone's property, it's gonna be a lot softer. That's all I'm saying. I get what you're saying, and I get the hoops you gotta jump through. But constitutionally, we could get sued. Like you said, there's so many other constitutional things. If you figure out a soft way to do it, we can avoid that litigious part, is what I'm saying. Or even, I'm sure this guy that I'm thinking of is if his family saw a number over here that's gonna help them put him in a facility and not have to deal anymore with the day-to-day, that may be attractive.
But my issue is the house might be worth 50,000 and we've already put 20,000, so, and they're not gonna do it for less than 100,000. Like, the math most likely is not going to pan out.
It's not gonna be up to them to have the math already defined, and they're gonna get it taken anyway. They don't really have a say in what price they're getting. You're taking it.
Jackie?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment about hoarding that, I mean, it's a mental health issue. It takes a lot of time to get these people not to hoard because it stems from traumas, it stems from loss, and that's why they hoard. So I don't even know if we have anybody in our community to address the needs of these people because, you know I see hoarders all the time and they have to bring in professionals from elsewhere to deal with these hoarders, so I don't even know if we have resources in our community to deal with the hoarders. And you can't do like hospitalizations or M1 hold because that's not gonna do any good. They need treatment and I mean, what do we do when we don't have those kind of resources?
I would say there's some mental health groups
Behavioral health.
at every single one of these cases. So I would say that there's.
Yeah, but they have to, their discipline has to be hoarding.
Well, not hoarding though. I mean, everyone. I mean, the people that are having their dilapidated houses and they don't have hot water and they let their house go. Those people also generally do have substance abuse or mental illness that's really
Right,
serious.
But I was specifically talking about hoarding because, I mean, that seems to be an issue that's nationwide and, how do we deal with that?
Do you know, because I know co-responders have been working with them, have they been trying to get them connected for a regular counselor at behavioral health?
What I'll tell you is the more serious case that we had that code had to get involved in, that one, we had numerous attempts to try to get that individual help with co-responders, and that individual wants nothing to do with it, which again resulted in us going to the court proceedings and everything else.
So even
I
though
can't
our
speak amongst
co-responders
big, yeah.
aren't skilled to be able to do hoarding, they won't even engage with our co-responder, which could be the first step. And then, because I don't know the certifications at the behavioral health for their different counselors. And I don't know what requirement, if there's a different specialty for hoarding versus if it's covered in one of the other licensures. I don't know the ins and outs of that from a local resource perspective.
I would say when the co-responders go out, and if it's something that they know they can't handle, they go down the route of finding resources or offering and getting them engaged with the resources they need. So if it's hoarding or something they aren't usually dealing with, they get them headed in the right.
But Jackie's question is, do we have that even locally? My answer is I don't.
Oh, at behavioral health, I have no idea.
That's the,
I would
specific
think that
question.
I would almost think that they would. I mean, they've got, doctors.
Can I ask that question? So could you go back to what your question, so go back to that slide. So you're asking us in regards to when it's an issue, are you saying, so now these 6 houses that there's a challenge? I guess, are we thinking of something as a policy? This is how we'll do it, or are we looking at specific, I guess I'm not quite sure maybe what the question
And
was.
it was not a very good, well thought out question.
Okay.
I guess my thing is, what's frustrating is we've carved away at the edges with some of this discussion, and some of it's going to help very much type of situation. But then we've got these just hardcore cases that they represent. It's not the lower level. It's either a life safety issue or it's a significant issue on the neighborhood, and it's not getting fixed.
And let me use this, that's why I wanted this slide up. So if you look at that photo on the right, that is a accumulation of junk and rubbish in the yard. We went through court for probably a 2-year process. We eventually spent tens of thousands of dollars cleaning that up. that's now a lien, tax lien. It is or will be, or is certified as a tax lien. And it's back almost as bad yet again. And so what we're gonna end up with, I just want council to be clear that my approach currently, as this works its way through court again, is gonna be, that's gonna be another tax lien, and then eventually the owner of that property is gonna lose it because they can't solve the problem.
Now, if there's a good news in quotations for people who can't see that, this is a priority lien since it is a nuisance.
That's right.
So no matter what happens with the property, we get it paid back. But if there is something in the house that is not a rubbish type of thing, so if it's wiring, we don't have the super priority. Am I using the right
The
language?
super priority.
A super priority lien.
The thing on the left, we wouldn't even mess with. Right? If Frank says that's not a fire safety
But that's not my
authority
question.
issue.
So if there's an electrical issue in a house, do we try to brainstorm on getting creative if there's ways to get individuals out? Or do we look at condemning the house? Like, do you want us to bring back some options knowing that these are only for the hardcore remaining issues?
Look, here's the simple thing. You gotta ask one question, two parts. How do we get the best result for the home / neighborhood and the individual? Okay? Throwing them into the street, tax lien, I don't care how a tax lien looks, what you call it, it's still a tax lien, they're gonna lose the home, they're gonna end up homeless. Either way. So you asked earlier, what do other communities do? I've said it before, I don't care what other communities do. What we're doing is what we're doing. So I would advise Eric, or I would request that you guys figure out a way or look into a way to pull this in a soft manner, which means I get it. I get money's hard, but you're going to get the house anyway from the tax lien. And I think if you're going to end up with the home anyway from a tax lien and just go hardcore condemnation or tax lien route, it looks a lot rougher than if we try to figure out a program where we can have the individual, whether it's considered forceful or not, sell the home to the city, and then we figure out the best, that user now, or that homeowner now has some sort of money to move into their next phase of life, whatever that be. We're not doctors, we're not mental health providers. Technically, we do a service with first responders, but it's not our responsibility to see where that person goes
But
next.
they're not gonna sell the house.
That's what I'm saying. What? They're not gonna sell the house, but we can condemn it and take it. So why not, as a community, figure out a better way to do that? A better aesthetic than condemnation, taking the home. A soft way of compensating the homeowner for the home. They get a way to move on to the next phase of their life. The city gets the property, and I get it. We may not flush out profit on that property, but if we're sitting here at the table talking about profit, this conversation should be having. I get it. Let me finish. You're going to get the house anyway in the hard way. Okay, we can't condemn it or take it. With some of these situations, and I'm not talking about these 6. I don't know, you know what I mean? I'm not saying these 6 in particular, but for future and to set a precedence that maybe other communities would follow. We create a soft exit for some of these people that can't own a home. If you said it a while ago, I'm hardcore and I don't care. They don't have the ability to own a home, they shouldn't own it. Well, maybe they shouldn't own it, but maybe we should acquire that from them in a more humane way, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? We tried it with Will. It didn't work out. We did what we could there. That was a situation where we worked with that man a lot. That's all I'm saying is, can we figure out a way to create some soft exits for some of these harder cases? And then the guy with, he has the ability, and his family have the ability to put him in the bridge, not a mental health facility, but somewhere where maybe he can't hoard all this crap all the time. And then he's their problem in a sense. I'm not trying to be hard, but we're trying to figure out a way for the best end result for the home and the neighborhood, the best end result for the individual. And that's all I'm saying. Maybe we can figure something out. Now, if you guys are willing to say, no, we don't want to do that, let's take them, let's take the axe to it, then There's nothing I
I'm
can do
not
about
trying to be argumentative, but I feel like I'm missing something because what I hear is, let's try to find a soft way to get them out. So we start on that path, which sounds good, okay? So I'm good there. We go to them and we say, will you sell your house? It appraised or the assessor's office has it down for 50,000. We'll pay you 50,000. So we're making the offer. If they say no, the only way then to get that situation out is the two things.
Yeah, I've seen it done with properties on $1 million levels, so I know it can be done with a property on a $50,000 level. That homeowner can get some sort of tax credit, some sort of, we figured out a creative way to get them
What I'm saying
compensated.
is the minute they say no, our options are limited to the other ones. We can get creative to try to get them to say yes, but they don't.
I understand that.
Okay.
But a landowner can say, no, I'm not gonna sell my property. Go ahead and condemn it, and I will take this compensation. It's done all the time. The IRS pays people, gives people tax credits. I've seen it done. So what I'm saying is you pay them for the condemnation. There's a way to give them whether it's through some sort of tax break, whether it's through a free year of housing somewhere else. Again, we'd be creative. There's ways to do it. I've seen it done, with $1 million properties all the time, farms, ag land, it happens all the time. What happens is the buyer doesn't want to sell, or the buyer wants to sell, but it's not a straight sale. If you do a forced condemnation there's a word for it, and then the buyer gets some sort of credit because it was condemned. There's ways to do it.
I don't know anything about that, but
I can give you specific examples tomorrow.
But that's not where I'm going with this. What you've introduced is the concept of, let's say we get a situation like the one that was just up on the screen for you. He doesn't fix it, and we know that the cost of cleanup is gonna be $20,000, and he'll never be able to pay that. So it's gonna go to a tax lien and it's gonna sell. Instead of just doing that, we say, look, you're gonna be on the hook for paying us back. We got this court order. You're not gonna be able to do it, so
this is, I'm not trying to argue it out. What I'm saying is we just figured out a soft exit. In the examples that I'm talking about, from a federal law standpoint, this landowner let an entity use eminent domain, and then the landowner was able to get a tax credit. Now, I know that's not the exact same thing we're talking about here, but as a municipality, we're not bound to everything the state does. We have the ability to create our own rules.
So can I add about eminent domain? So what you can do, I know where you're going with this. So for example, Walgreens comes in and they offered everybody to tear down that house. They gave the value. CDOT came in and they wanted to do the two-way highway, so they bought that restaurant. They eminent domain that restaurant and gave them the value for that restaurant. So you can do it where you say, so most of the time now with eminent domain, they usually will give you the value of the property.
They have to.
Yeah, but that's taking a property for a public purpose.
That's what I meant.
But this is a housing crisis.
So that's why I was
We're
asking,
just talking
can you
about
add-
that. We
so I
have
think
to
that's where he's
repurpose
going.
that house. I was just asking Brandon what the house is on the east side of State. Okay, there's this massive house. I asked you about it yesterday, Heather. It's a white and blue house that burned. Okay, something happened to it and it burned. It's like 4 homes put together.
Is it the one with the greenhouse in the front?
I don't know, it probably was a really pretty house when it was intact, but it's like 4 homes. So if the city could acquire that through whatever way, you've just created 4 units that we could then retrofit and rent out or use for whatever the city needed as far as housing. And that's all I'm saying is, because we're trying to repurpose this house for housing, it is a public service. We're trying to create a public service. We're not only helping the homeowner, we're also creating something for the community, and then the city can flip the house or turn it into something. I mean, again, I don't know how that works about cities owning homes, but creating a soft exit for the homeowner is an easy way to accomplish what we want, and an easy way for us to kind of push the homeowner into the next stage of life. Again, maybe they don't have the ability to live in a home, like Heather said, or maintain it, but to me, that feels a lot better than any sort of take because of a lien or anything like that. And then the homeowner's just out on the street and we have the property to do whatever we can. To me, that just seems like something that we can brainstorm and do. So I'm saying.
There are some light, call it condemnation proceedings you can do. I've never looked into that. My understanding is that's for neighborhoods. You can clear neighborhoods to be blighted. You don't do it on a home by home basis.
We would have to research if eminent domain could be used on a property specific, if we're saying the public good is whatever, either to remediate the nuisance or safety issue, or to.
I'm dubious, but
We have to research it, but what I find more interesting is a staff perspective. We've usually viewed eminent domain as something council would want to stay far away from,
That's what I
because
would think.
Not if you can pay them out.
you have to pay them out legally.
You have to.
Yeah, there's no choice. When you use eminent domain, you have to pay the market value. And then if you're using it and the court finds that it was higher or it was within a certain amount or something, you have to pay their attorney fees on top of it. So eminent domain is usually seen as a dirty bird and taking, I mean, you're paying the market, but it goes through the court and how it decides and all of that kind of stuff. And it's historically, from a staff, even at CML, like, people stay away from using eminent domain. It's seen as a dirty word. So beyond trying to do legal research, what I find most interesting, to me, that feels as bad as taking someone's house, but it's not feeling that way to you.
I honestly, I couldn't even remember the word eminent domain, and what I'm saying is, I just don't see how eminent domain is a dirty word, but tax foreclosure is not a dirty word. And again, to me, I don't care about either one, the verbiage. What I'm saying is, can we figure out a way for if we're gonna get into verbiage, a soft exit for the person who lives in the home?
So
Michael, what you're saying, honestly, how I read it, I get where you're coming from, but I think what you're saying is just a different way. The person said no, now we're forcing them to sell it, we're stuffing money in their pocket, and they're still gonna be pissed off.
They're gonna be pissed off if we take it and we don't put any money in the
Well, no,
pocket.
so regardless, if they're not willing to sell, so that's what I'm saying, is all these different ways we're talking about, it's still gonna look bad.
I don't care if it looks bad, if the person has somewhere to live and the city gets the property and the situation is remediated. It's gonna look bad if we take it because of a tax lien, and it's gonna look bad if we use eminent domain. I don't care about any of that. What I'm saying is, I'll tell you right now, if we come in as a city and are able to help people with mental disorders have a soft exit from their home, and now they have a place to live, and this home has been repurposed for community use, or some of their family has it, and it's not a nuisance to the neighborhood anymore, nobody's gonna care.
You can't force them to live somewhere else, so.
Oh,
I'm
God,
just saying.
you guys, I don't even understand what you guys want. Like, I'm not really sure what you got, if you guys want me to say that I'm okay with just taking the home and not trying to help the homeowner, I can't say that. But, I
Michael,
mean,
I made a note though, for us to look into the legal nuances of eminent domain from a tool.
You know, the way you can do that is you can run around it. You go through the tax lien. But it involves us making sure that we acquire that tax lien, because then we can take the house, put it back on the market, sell it, and give the owner the difference between what we had into it and what we got out of it. That accomplishes the same thing.
that's pretty generous. So that's good.
So now you have the city being a property,
Yeah,
property,
realtor.
and all the exposure to the vacant.
Yeah, right. But you can run around into that same result.
Well, so I'm not trying to argue for it, but the alternative is without a different solution, we've got a life safety issue that's not being addressed for both the person living in the house and the neighborhood. So I'm not saying that should be the only thing we look at. I'm just saying, right now, the alternative we feel stuck with is we get the repeated calls from the neighborhood, we get the concerns that this person's life safety is there, type of thing.
So it seems like there's a lot of additional research needs to be done about what real options we have, since there's no real clarity of what all options are when it comes to eminent domain and things like that. What do you need council to give you guidance on today?
Well, let us brainstorm on that. The last thing is if we can go to the slide on the fees. Are you okay if we bring something to you to add to the code that these building code violations can have fines, similar to what the exterior fines are? I think we just beat you down, so you'll be tired at this point, maybe. Counselor Jan Dehill, are you okay with that? I did that right when you closed the thing. I'm sorry, Holly. Are you okay with this?
Yeah, I mean, if the group is okay with it, I'm cool with it.
Okay.
Then back to the discussion, I can chime in real quick, Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
The Zoom just shut down about 10 minutes ago, so I was off for about 7 minutes of that conversation. I know Mike was talking a lot and asking questions and that, but if I recall, about 20 minutes ago, Heather, your original question was to council, are you okay with staff researching more options if it gets to that place? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
correct. And just quickly summarize, Michael, we need to do research in eminent domain. Not that that's a direction everyone's wanting to look into, but we don't even know the legal in and outs on that for this scenario.
Okay, thank you. I would be good with you guys doing more research on that piece.
Can I ask one more question? So I know we've talked about this, so like the 6 homes and things like that, and obviously look at, is there issues on the legal side? Like, I kind of would like your feedback a little bit in regards to, I'm assuming that's part of why you're at the table as well. And so also maybe from whether it's a criminal situation, whether it's so kind of from your perspective, also your feedback into what's going on here.
Captain Birch, if there's other stuff too that's.
And I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used your
Well,
first name.
I don't know who brought it
apologize.
up earlier, but, the criminal nuisance violation, so that in itself is separate, right? Because that's the drug-related offense. That in itself has its own little subsections that has to be met, that is at times very hard for us as an investigations unit to prove. So when that is condemned based on drug dealing, that's one thing. That solves a temporary problem. That's a permanent issue, right? But when it comes to just day in and day out code stuff, the difference between what the CSOs are dealing with and what Rachel's code division is dealing with are really different in a lot of ways. The CSOs may be going and doing the enforcement aspect, but they're not actually walking into a home and, oh, this is a fire hazard, this is this. They're not doing any of that. That's where that building inspector comes in. They're the buffer between their side of the code and then our side of the code. So I think, because I've heard everyone talk tonight, there's just different aspects of the code that are, there's the law enforcement standpoint that we do the enforcement, the upkeep of properties, the rubbish, a lot of that is our aspect. But then there's the building code aspect that we forget about too, and I think that's more of what we're focused on tonight. But that in itself has its own integral aspects. That criminal nuisance thing, I don't know if there could be more research on that, but I wish there was an easy.
But Liz, let me make sure you weren't asking this. So Captain Birch, when we do have some of these vacant homes that then like the people are holding on to and it's getting run down, do you see it sometimes turning into trap homes and drawing crime and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So for example, last week, we conducted a narcotics operation in the Batwell. The citizens in this area constantly complain. It's an 80-year-old man, technically an at-risk adult, trap activity nonstop, day and night. I think we monitored within a day period 22 different people to and from this residence. This is probably 200 yards, 300 yards from the school district. This is our second search warrant operation. We do the operation. We don't find illicit narcotics inside the house. For our criminal nuisance violation, we have to have that to show the violation. So now our hands are tied again. We tell them, no, stop doing this. You can't be doing this type of activity. Now that old man is in the house getting exploited. His house is paid for, so he doesn't have to worry about that. He's on Social Security or whatever. So. But this is going to be a revolving door. I guarantee you we do 3 or 4 more search warrants that are just to appease the citizens that are dealing with this.
And so this is not a vacant home, this is,
No.
yeah.
This
And that's
is a-
where I was asking, because I felt like, and I was wondering if some of the ones that are getting more, that we're saying are more beat down, I guess that's what I was feeling was a little bit that there is stuff going on,
all over.
and so.
But it's specific to trap activity, right? The trap activity. So not finding the drugs in there benefits them, and I get it.
Yeah.
But there's also times where you hit a residential home and it's dry. We may not always have the intelligence that tells us, and what I mean by dry is there's no drugs.
Yeah.
Which then constitutes being there moving forward with criminal nuisance violation.
So listening to Captain Birch, the situation he offered feels a little sensitive, but there's probably other situations where it's a landlord, when we're not finding the drugs, it's hard to get them motivated to maybe get that person out as a tenant or to change the behavior, and we're not able to trigger the new code that you guys have. Would you be open to us researching a little bit more in that situation on have we made it too strict or not type of thing? If there's that nuisance criminal behavior, just the fact that they don't find the drugs in the house doesn't mean at one point it wasn't in there and it's still not having all the activity type of thing. Okay. It still may be we can't do any more, but we can still.
I just feel like there might be a connection, and so kind of just, and I wanted to if there is, what that connection is, et cetera.
It's like a Venn diagram of like the
Yes.
problem houses and the houses that are problem houses that have all the drug issues also. And in a roundabout way, pursuing it through the building code, the burden of proof is a little bit lower. So it's an easier way. I would say Brandon's using us a little bit, but, you know, we get to a result.
And I'm gonna be honest, I don't love this because Lynn doing work for the Housing Coalition, he'd go into some of these homes and it was exactly that, where you have older people. It's really sad. You have older people at these homes and their kids or adult kids are in there totally exploiting the situation. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to see what he saw, and some of the stories I heard. Sounds like it's the same.
So is there anything that staff in that type of situation need guidance from council on at all regarding that, or is that something that?
I think it'd be
some of
good
these
for
changes-
us to research and see if it can be more flexible first. And then the question is if it can, how much more flexible do you want to be? But we should probably check, because you start getting into taking and stuff like that. So you just have to be very careful on what the criteria is. So we should research that.
It also is, and I, Captain Birch, it's a burden on him. So whether or not there are codes, like building codes, the burden falls a lot on the CSOs because they're out in the field. And they're going to these properties over and over again. And then when I went to Heather to ask to have this work session, it was because we did have one of our monthly code enforcement meetings, which is my department and code enforcement, and we've looped Eric in, and Kathy's there sometimes, so that we can come at it from all angles, economic development, and, you know, Kathy's connections, and Eric's the legal side, and I'm the building department, and we're figuring out housing, and then we've also got the CSOs there. Well, we have the co-responders come, like we're all in a room trying, beating our head against our wall on this once a month, trying to figure these out. We put a lot of brains on this, and we have never really found good solutions. And we got to one point, I think last summer before I went on maternity leave, where the CSOs and my building inspector were just like, why do we keep doing this? Like, why do we keep going after these same properties if nothing gets better? And like, our words don't mean anything because we never do anything. So let's just take them off the list if we're not gonna do anything. And if the neighbors complain, then let's, you know, like say that we haven't done anything. And I was like, at some point, like, we have to go to council, because either we're not gonna enforce the letter of the law, or we are, and we're gonna deal with the consequences. But we can't do nothing, and we can't live in limbo forever. And it was the fair thing to do to the men that are out there doing this job every day. Men and women, because Wendy is awesome.
That's it for what we have.
Okay, and what was? Okay, I'll go around the room and just see anybody have any other comments or questions for Mr. Carson.
My biggest concern is just what are we considering financial resources? Because Excel's going up. We had that discussion last week. Health insurance rates are going up. Prescriptions are going up. And so people are making tough decisions. And then we're going to, it just makes it tough because, you know, the cost of living is way outpacing the amount of money people are making. And so it's just a tough situation to be in. So that's the only thing I would say we need to look at is what we're considering financial resources. Because people are already making tough decisions. Because one of the things we're talking about is you have to have power, right? If you can't afford to pay your cell bill, or you can't afford your insulin, you know, which one do you do?
I think we mostly meant like landlords. Like, I think when we thought about that category, we thought like also the banks, but I mean, that usually falls into the vacant. But I think we were mostly thinking about those are rental properties. So if you have a rental property and you're kind of a slumlord, and so if you're kind of a slumlord and that's a rental property, you should sell it if you're not going to take care of it.
Well, and I agree very, because our demographics are very sobering and the economy is very, very hard. And at the same time, there's this thing of what's called being house poor, that people have purchased a house that's beyond their means and maybe they need to downsize so they can maintain a house that they can afford. And I've worked in a lot of different communities with a lot of different demographics. It happens throughout the whole spectrum. I worked in a community where you have mansions and you go inside for an inspection and they can only afford mattresses on the floor because they wanted to buy zip code in the mansion. And then if the roof needs repaired, then don't buy the mansion type of thing. So I think all of that can be true all at one time type of thing is the only thing I would offer.
My biggest concern is we don't want to exacerbate an already covered problem. So, but I understand what you're saying, if it's landlords and make those problems. You know, and if we can help educate people, direct them towards resources.
I just appreciate the extra explanation about financial resources, because my brain instantly to people that own the home and they're gonna get a fine if they go in and there's an open wire where somebody else that would get overlooked. That was the unjust part of it for me, but if it's a landlord, yeah, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know how best to define that, to put those into columns, but yeah, thanks for explaining that. Thanks for doing this.
And sorry we didn't do a better job of
Oh, that's okay.
showing that, like we went around this stuff so much, but yeah, that's an important distinction.
That's it. Thank you.
Counselor Jackie, you?
Good.
Did I do Counselor Young be already?
You did now.
And I just want to make sure the staff felt like council had given you a clear direction on what we need to do, the direction as far as moving forward. Research. Is there anything else you discuss at this time?
Oh, you don't have to, it's my husband. He said this is fascinating and sent me a gift of a cartoon eating popcorn.
Well, tell us to give us some popcorn. No.
Thank you, Polly, for catching the public comment.
Your husband-
I know.